in Revelation 6:1, you mentioned earlier that we talk about the phrases of man's wrath versus Satan's wrath, because Satan's wrath does appear in Revelation 12. But in Isaiah chapter 10, God talks about Assyria being his wrath, very specific, against Israel and others. And so just because we see the Antichrist come on the scene and there's war that takes place, and the ramifications, and then also the consequences, the collateral damage that happens through war, famine, pestilence, etc. It's not like, oh, well, this is just from man. God, who's the one that opened the first seal? It was the Lamb.
That's right.
And it was the supernatural agency of the angels. So this unleashing still is God's unleashing it upon the world. It's still from his hand, is it not?
Absolutely. I think really what we're talking about here then is, well, the removal of the restraining influence, or the removal of the restrainer. When God ceases to restrain the mystery of iniquity, he is going to let the angelic realm go to degrees and directions he's not allowed them to go. He's going to let human beings go in directions and degrees that he's not allowed them to go. He's been putting the brakes on for the last 6,000 years. And all of a sudden he's going to take the brakes off, he's going to remove his restraining hand, and they're going to run amok on planet Earth.
Yeah, and so that opening of the first seal and the arrival of the figure. Now let me just say this too. This is important because some people can be confused that the first rider is referring to a specific human being, the Antichrist, and then the second rider. I have an issue with that, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. Is if you look at the other riders, the second rider is bringing war. Well, it's not bringing a human being. The third rider is bringing, pestilence or whatever, death. That's not bringing a human being. And so, but it's still a judgment. So let me explain what I mean. You can add to it. Is I think that the first horse is a unleashing of these are figurative, right? They are figurative, okay? They are pointing to something. They're pointing to something real. It could be pointing to a literal human figure. I'm not bound by that. But it also could be pointing the arrival of the system, the beast system, which appears on the scene and then begins to consolidate, which again would include a figure or a person. But all these things being unleashed, there's a system now that it's go for it. Finalize your system. Because we know that the Antichrist is going to take full tyrannical authority as an autocrat in the middle. Yeah. He's going to be there, though. But this is his time where he's released. He's on the scene now, right? He's released on the scene, but he begins to solidify the system, the beast system, and the governments, along with the 10 kings or whatever that looks like, the 10 figures, because he has an agenda. But he's not going to. Well, you can correct me here, but let's talk about. Is he going to arrive on the scene on day one as a full dictator of the whole earth?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
It's going to take a little while for everything to be set up, and then once he's established, then he's going to assert control over the 10 kings, and we know that 3 are going to fall in that process. Mm-hmm. And then once that's done, then he's going to assert his control over Israel and the rest of the world.
Yeah, we see that happening in the midpoint, where the midpoint is where there's a mortal wound. He goes and declares himself to be God. He's allegedly resurrected. Then he goes to be this tyrannical autocrat where he establishes the mark of the beast, etc. Okay. So,
I do want to take up one point, though. You mentioned the seals, and I want to reinforce the point you made about consistency in our interpretation principles. If we're going to say that the rider on the first horse is a human being, you would think that the riders on the second and third and the fourth and fifth horses under the fourth seal would also be human beings. But since the other ones are angelic beings or figurative, you can that's where we have to go with the first one. Now, personally, I think each of the riders on those horses is literal angelic messengers. I wouldn't be surprised if the first one is Satan himself, because he is the one that's going to be ruling here on earth.
The dragon, yeah, clearly. It's his authority he's been given. Mm-hmm.
And in the early church, it's interesting to see the fathers jump back and forth between calling the beast the dragon and calling the dragon the beast, and they're dealing with the same tension that you were just addressing.
Yeah, no, that's well said. I mean, I could go along with that perfectly. It's that consistency
Yeah.
that I struggled with and going, well, because everyone's like, well, that's the Antichrist. He's got a bow. He's going around. Is he on a literal horse? Is maybe he has a 9mm with no bullets? I mean, you're like, wait a minute. That's a little bit too. That's actually taking this imagery and sometimes making it a little bit too literal.
Yeah.
Especially because we are dealing with imagery. We're dealing with colors. I mean, what does that represent? But nevertheless, I think what we know is this. Your book, 10 Potent Proofs for the Pre-Tribulation Rapture. You have in there the word tribulation, and you have the word pre. So we want to understand this tribulation period and how it's distinct from just times of trouble. And so these people that accuse us of escapism, or especially Americans, you see people in other countries get upset at American pre-tribulational teaching because they're like, yeah, you guys think you get to escape everything. What gives you, just because you're American Christians, that you don't have to deal with trouble? And it's like, hey, wait a minute, we never said that. And if people are saying that, then it's a misunderstanding or misrepresentation of the pre-trib doctrine.
No, absolutely. No teacher that I know in the pre-tribulation rapture camp has ever taught that Christians can't see tribulation. That's a complete misunderstanding. The world is filled with believers in tribulation. And we even have tribulations here in America. Now, most of us don't feel really strong tribulations, but if someone is getting thrown in jail or fined because of their stand on the alphabet issue, and they're not going to, they're working in their bakery and they refuse to bake for certain parties, or they refuse to admit certain parties, they face tribulation over that. And it's real and it's painful. The pre-tribulation rapture position is saying that there's a period of exceptional tribulation at the end of the age, which is going to go far beyond in degree any tribulation in the previous history of the world. It's going to take the world where they've never been before, not only in seeing persecution worse than they've ever seen before, but in seeing what we would regard as acts of God to a degree they've never seen before, with earthquakes and visitations from asteroids and comets from space.
Water turning to blood, poisons, bitterness, wormwood. I mean, you name it, right?
And then supernatural manifestations way beyond what the world has ever seen before.
Yeah.
So that's what the tribulation is that we get delivered from.
Yeah.
And we don't get delivered from that merely and only because the church can't see tribulation. We get delivered from it because this tribulation is severe enough it falls under the category of judgment.